This is the Maimon Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today, I'm with Dent to join Josh Bossé in Remembering Shabbat.
Yes, Remembering Shabbat. Welcome, everyone. Reed, hello, welcome to the series.
Hello, thank you. It's very good to be with you and also with you, Brent.
Thank you. I like how Josh intentionally welcomes people in, too. You know, because sometimes we get into it, and I'm like, I do my intro, and then people are like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, oh, yeah, Reed hasn't talked for 5 minutes. Well, I mean, that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's just nice to intentionally welcome everyone in. So I appreciate that, Josh.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm ready to just make a home right here.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, this is to just center ourselves. We are digging into Shabbat as a spiritual practice. And we're going to use some of the linguistics of the text to kind of maybe add some layers to that, because it's, historically, I think we get the question a lot of like, how do I actually do Shabbat? How do I practice Sabbath? Because we talk so much about why it's important. And I think that leaves a lot of people like, how do we do this? So last week we had Elle on the podcast, and we broke down a couple words. We broke down the root word of Shabbat, which is shavat, which means stillness, just to stop. And it's a very simple word. And I think that's always good to remember for Shabbat, is that at root, it is very simple. It's just finding stillness, slowing down, taking a breath. It's all those things. The other thing we looked into was the word shamar, which means to watch over and guard. And we primarily talked about, how we watch over our the holy time of Shabbat. How do we stop work from getting in? How can we pull ourselves back from just how easy it is sometimes to slide into work, to get that, see a work email come through your phone, and all of a sudden you can't get it out of your brain, those sorts of things.
All too easy.
All too easy. It's very, very easy. Honestly, that part of the conversation, I had to hold myself back. I was like on the verge of giving a whole like updated list of like, here's all the pillars of modern Hellenism and how we, work against each one. And that would have been cool for me, but we mostly talked about how to prepare for Shabbat and how to create boundaries. And in truth, that kind of bleeds over a little bit into remembering the Sabbath day, because one of the things that's interesting about this idea of remembering the Sabbath that we hear about a lot in the text, to remember the Sabbath day, to make it holy, is, it's interesting talking about remembering the day that is today. Like if you're on Shabbat, why do you need to remember Shabbat? But also, I think this gives us a little hint, something that we'll talk about a bit later in the series. But this idea of like, remembering Shabbat is something we probably need to do more when it's not Shabbat. That's another conversation for another time, though. Today, we're still talking about Shabbat and how to make Shabbat. Last time, we kind of talked about what in Judaism are called like the negative commandments. Like, here is the things we shouldn't be doing on Shabbat, and here's how we, like the rabbis talk about, you build a fence, you make it so that it's easy to not mess up your Shabbat. Now we're looking at probably the harder side of it, and that is the positive commandment, what we are supposed to be doing. What do we fill that time with? And to make sure that we don't get too analytical and up in our heads, we need to like bring our energy down, get a little centered, get a little bit more in our lived emotional reality as human beings. And my favorite way to do that, to kind of facilitate that dance between the head and the heart, is to read a Heschel quote. And actually, Reed, you love to read aloud. Would you mind reading the very first quote I have there in our notes doc?
The seventh day is a palace in time which we build. It is made of soul, of joy and reticence. In its atmosphere, a discipline is a reminder of adjacency to eternity.
That is good.
There's a lot of big words there.
It always amazes me how much he can pack into a single sentence.
Yeah.
I guess that's 2 sentences, but just this tiny little idea. Like he creates a palace with his words.
Yes. That's my favorite thing about Heschel is he doesn't let his philosophy spoil his poetry.
This is from the Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
The very first book we've ever referenced on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And will probably be the very last one.
Oh man, no doubt.
In my beginning is my end.
So I wanted to start with this quote because I think it gives us a different sense of what we're supposed to be doing on Shabbat than we normally think about. A lot of times we think about it like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing holy things, or it's supposed to be set apart, or it's supposed to be about resting and relaxing. And none of those things are wrong, but I think that we can over compartmentalize it. And what I love about how Heschel talks about it is Shabbat isn't just a routine, a ritual. It is a profound encounter with something much, much bigger than us. And I really like that, especially in light of something I mentioned on the last episode, which is that, to the best of my knowledge, Shabbat is the one spiritual practice that we see God perform. And perform presumably for his own sake. And this idea of us creating a palace in time, not a palace in space, not just filling our lives with luxuries, even though that is part of Shabbat, is enjoying the nicer things God's blessed us with, but that we are building something out of time, out of our stillness, made just out of our soul, our joy, our sitting there. And he says something else I really like. I think I also said something about this in the last episode, but it's atmospheric. It's like, I think I talked about this in regards to like how you know whether a party is successful or not. Like it's in the atmosphere. Are people on the dance floor or not? Are they just all standing around awkwardly? What I love about this too is he uses the word reminder, which is so perfect for us to talk about remembering. But he talks about it being a reminder of adjacency to eternity. Adjacency, there's a lot of big fancy words in here, but that we are right next to eternity. We are so close to God. And Shabbat is the day where we fully experience that, where there's a little thin space.
To use your dance floor analogy a little bit, I think about this all the time because I'm at weddings frequently, couple dozen times a year, typically. If you have a dance floor that is physically too big for the number of people who are at the wedding, it never feels like anything's happening.
Ooh.
Because it's too big. So in the same way, if you make this idea of Shabbat bigger than the one day, if you try to stretch it out into the rest of the week, then all of a sudden there is no atmosphere. It's not concentrated enough to actually mean anything.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's also, I think, a really practical point, and something we'll get into actually when I get to the other Heschel quote. But yeah, the Shabbat isn't just supposed to be the biggest, coolest thing you can imagine. It's something that is supposed to be filled with care and consideration and closeness to God. And that can be in very, very small things. It's about, yeah, exactly like you said, Brent, having the right size dance floor for who is there and what they're getting up to.
Because I think the temptation for me, as you were saying those things, is like, well, shouldn't I always want to be closer to God, closer to eternity, closer to all these things? But there is this time that's supposed to be set aside for this even closeness.
Yeah. Well, what's percolating with you, Reed? I can see you've got something.
I want to think for a second, if we can just dig in a little bit more to this picture of a palace in time.
Yes,
because
please.
it sounds really beautiful, and then I start thinking about it, and I wonder, what am I thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
So you, Josh, as you were talking about it, you mentioned a palace in space as a contrast to a palace in time. And that reminded me of in Heschel when he says 6 days a week we are concerned with the things of space, geographical things.
Yep.
But this day we're concerned with things of time. So I wonder if we can just say a little bit more and try to tease out this image of palace in time. And maybe it's instructive to start by thinking about a palace in space, because we know what a geographical... So what do we think of? What do you guys think of when you think of a palace? A palace. And as, I guess, opposed to just, any other kind of building. What makes a palace a palace?
This is great. I mean, man, I love the Spirit's doing something, because that is exactly where I was about to head. And so when I think of a palace, well, for one thing, a palace is, on a technical level, it's where a king lives, right? It's where royalty lives. And what I like about his use here is that it doesn't say whose palace it is. It's just a palace in time. And if we think about it more abstractly, more philosophically, a palace is, on one level, a home, but it's not just a super big, nice home. Like, we understand the difference between, like, a palace and a mansion, or a McMansion, even. Like, we can sense the difference between those things. And the difference, to me, is, like, grandeur and majesty and splendor. Like, there is supposed to be something that is both homey, that is supposed to contain every aspect of our lives, the most intimate aspect. But it is also something that is containing this sense of awe and wonder. And when I think about those things in terms of time, like, that speaks much more to me of things that are relational, things that are intimate, things that are, like, personally profound. I don't know about you guys. I've had lots of profound experiences in my life. Some of them are things that I can go to people and say, look at this big, profound thing. Or, I'm about to become a father. That's one of those things that everyone's like, yeah, that's big and profound. You'll probably feel something crazy and wild. But, there are things that have happened in my life that were so profound, and I don't know if I can communicate them to anyone. Just little private moments, little, like, beautiful thoughts that I'm like, I don't even know if it's true. But I remember one time I was, I'll share this one because it's a little silly. It was during COVID, and so our church was meeting in a park outside. It was a beautiful spring, or no, it was fall. That's right, because the leaves were just starting to change colors. The sermon just wasn't hitting me quite right. Like, it wasn't fully engaged me. I don't think it was, like, turning me off, but I was just like, my soul needed something else. And so my mind was wandering, and I just heard God say, like, hey, do you know I'm hiding behind one of the leaves here? And I just thought about, this idea of, like, a little, like, God being this little tiny, like, I don't know, like, woodland fairy or something, just hiding behind a leaf. And it made me just look at all the trees with, like, this new sense of reverence and, like, oh yeah, all of these things God's created, and he loves all creation. Why couldn't he be right here, right now? Is it such a thing unbecoming of God to become a little tiny person hiding behind a leaf? Is that beyond God? And it was like, I felt like I had a little wink, a little bedtime story. Like, it was something that felt precious, but not in any way that makes sense in the 6 days of, like, I didn't learn something profoundly new about God. It was just like an emotional connection, a little bond, a little weird moment that I shared with God. And to me, that is a building block of the palace of time. And that's where, to me, like, when I think about a palace in time, I think about, like, the best parts of my relationship with my wife, like, all the things that are just pure treasures. And some of them are deep and profound conversations filled with tears. Some of them are just pure joy. Some of them are the darker times that we've survived, and there's, like, this kind of knowledge this intimate knowledge you get of someone else or of the world that is only special because it's special to you. And to me, that is kind of the redemptive connection with other people, with creation, with God. Like, that is what is forming this palace. So all those experiences and us taking the time to notice them, to recognize them for what they are, to treasure them in our hearts, like it says of Mary when she got these words about Jesus. To me, that's very precious, and I love that, because that is what when I think about the Sabbath, literally this quote is one of the things I think about, is that image of the palace made out of time, made out of moments that we elevate and make holy because we were able to exercise our sense of awe and wonder and deep, profound, intimate appreciation.
So adjacency to eternity. Mm-hmm. I know eternity means a lot of things to a lot of people.
You know what? I'm going to stop you right there, because what you just said leads in perfectly to the next Heschel quote.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely perfectly.
That's funny, because I hadn't even looked ahead. I didn't know that was the next thing. Yeah. Okay, here it is, the next quote from Heschel. While Jewish tradition offers us no definition of the concept of eternity, it tells us how to experience the taste of eternity, or eternal life within time. Eternal life does not grow away from us. It is planted within us, growing beyond us.
Yes, eternity is not just a timeline that we are on and it just goes on and on and on in front of us. It is something that is in us. It is planted and it grows. And I think that this is where, when we try and wrap our heads around Shabbat, in the same way that Heschel says it's about time and not space, and we go, oh, wait, what does it look like to search out qualities of time rather than perfecting our space or making a little temple or shrine or something concrete? And similarly, this idea of eternity being something like a seed planted within us, growing beyond us. It's not contained by us, but it is within us, and it grows and it has a life of its own. And to be honest, I think that is, like, experientially what those moments of wonder are like. It's when you recognize something that is both within you, but also is alive and growing, and something you can't quite predict or lock down. It's not just, an opinion you have in your head or a personal belief. It's a little moment of profound connection. And this is where, we talk a lot about the Eastern Western dichotomy, that I think this really gets at, this idea of Jewish tradition not being like, here is our definition of eternity, but their focus being on how do we experience that? How do we taste eternity? To me, that gives us a hint of where to start, that what you're looking for is not to do the right things or the wrong things, or, it's not just about creating a formula. It's a kind of, I think of it as a kind of play. And I genuinely think that's why, Jesus talks about, in a positive way, having a childlike faith. That there is a willingness to play along with God's presence in creation, God's presence spiritually with us, God's presence through our relationships with other people. And genuinely, I think, like, the things that rise to the top in Shabbat for me are the things where we do, where I am able to kind of touch on something divine. Like when I recently, on this last Shabbat, actually, with Sophia, we were sitting there, and I'm trying to remember what it is we were doing, but it was something where it was one of, I realized in a moment, like, something about Sophia. I'm like, oh, you always ask me this question. Is it because you're really excited about this other thing? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Let me, like, engage with that more directly and, kind of play along with what you're really trying to get at here. And it was this beautiful moment where I saw a little bit more of her soul and how God formed her, and it made me treasure her more deeply. And it allowed me to like intermingle our joy in a new way. And it's like, that is something profound. It's not something I'd ever read in a marriage book. It's not something anyone could have predicted. It's not something my analytical brain could have predicted. It just something happened. Some magical divine thing happened, and I was able to notice it. And that playing along with it is, I think, the key to helping Shabbat like grow and become more fruitful, to plant it deeply and water it, and everything we were talking about last episode about shamar and tending to like the aspect of it that it can be used like kind of in a gardening metaphor of watching over a plant. Like you can't really know what a plant needs just by like creating a spreadsheet and a schedule of when you water it and this or that. Like, you have to actually look at the plant and say, oh, how's it doing? Oh, it looks kind of sad. Looks kind of wilty. Maybe it needs more water. Maybe it needs this. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Maybe it needs more plants around it. Like those are the sorts of the kinds of engagement with Shabbat that constitute the day. So to kind of recenter us, because I think I love the thoughts that I'm hearing from you two, and I want to now just step a little bit into the linguistic part, just so we can have a little bit more contrast and maybe draw some more practical lines here for everyone. So we're not just doing poetry and philosophy, as much as I would love to do that. Y'all know me. Okay, so how do we live Shabbat sacredly? And specifically, the words we're going to be looking at today are zakar and nasa. Zakar means to remember. I brought this up earlier. What is it exactly we're remembering? I talked briefly about how, maybe this is talking about the other 6 days of the week we're supposed to remember Shabbat, because it's easier to just to remember what the 6 days are like, because that's where our muscle memory is. That's where our spiritual muscle memory is. So we have to remember Shabbat so that we can do all the preparation like we talked about last week. But remembering, and Shabbat are really closely tied, and I think it goes beyond just an instruction for how to go about the 6 days. We're told a couple times in the text when it gives the commandment to keep Sabbath as remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. So I think it bears asking, what exactly are we remembering? I'm not going to dig into any one particular text, but I just want to throw this out there, because I think in Bema, we already have all the tools to give a pretty good answer. We talk about how, in the seventh day, in Shabbat, we are remembering. What are we remembering? What does Bema say that the message behind rest and Shabbat is?
That you are beloved.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop.
Full stop. And to use the Bema term, we're remembering that creation is good. Creation is good. And I think, with everything we were talking about before, about this palace in time, about this kind of playful relationship with creation and God and the Spirit and other people, and being fully present, like that is very difficult to do if you are just hyper vigilantly being like, on sin sniper patrol. Like that is not the mindset that allows you to see the good in things, because you're constantly looking for what might compromise us. And so we have to remember, if we're going to do Shabbat, there's the more Shammai way of Shabbat, which is rooted in, we're going to make this day so spiritually spotless and perfectly clean that there's not a lot of room for grace or humanity or God's love or our belovedness, as you said. So I think it is very foundational that we have to remember that creation is good. The other 6 days of the week, we can work on all the stuff that's not quite there yet. But there is, like we've said this before, but to Bring it back home because it's important. I don't, personally, I don't buy into the whole fall thing. I think there's some big problems with that I won't get into here. But, creation is good. Creation is still good. God didn't undo that. The fall didn't undo that. In fact, when we go back to Genesis 2, we weren't created inside the garden, hermetically sealed, supposed to stay there forever. God says we were supposed to go and work the land from which we were taken, which was outside Eden. So this is part of the world that God called good. We're still in that world. That's not to say that it's perfect in every way, but there are good parts to it, and you have to accept that. And not only that, I think we have to trust that that is the truer truth, because otherwise on Shabbat, it's always going to end up getting rolled back into, well, here are all the things that we did wrong this Shabbat. And look at all that instead of being like, hey, we put another block into this grand palace. We had that really special moment. That is what honors God in Shabbat.
I'm reminded of another Heschel quote where he says, "We on the Sabbath we turn from the world of creation to the creation of the world."
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And this reminds me to the question, "What am I remembering?" I am remembering not to take myself so seriously on Sabbath, because when I turn to the creation of the world, which I agree with you, it is a good world still, and that creation is ongoing. The creation of the world didn't end at the sixth day. It is an ongoing thing. God is still creating the world. When I turn to think about the good creation of the world, and I think Heschel actually alludes to this too, I observe that I am not necessary for the creation of the world, that I am not needed, that if I stop working, the world goes on just fine without me. And actually, as a species, maybe the world, would be better off if we quit working, or if we, in some ways it would be healthier if we weren't here. That's a diatribe for another time. But I see that I am not necessary for the functioning of the world. It's going to go on just fine without me. And yet I also observe, here I am anyway. I'm here because God wants me to be here, because I am beloved of God. And so I just am reminded not to take myself so seriously. And that's why I like, Josh, that you use the word play for Sabbath, because it is a time to engage in play, to play along, to see what comes, to be a little more frivolous. The word enjoyment is a word that I try to keep in front of me. What are we going to enjoy for this Sabbath day? And it helps, if we're always thinking of ourselves as workers, we take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Man.
I like what Reed said about, obviously the work is not done after 6 days, but yet that is what the text says. And I think that's one of the things that we're supposed to remember. There's more creating that will be done, but it's complete.
Yeah.
God has finished. It's done. It is enough. It's not done, but it is done.
Right.
And that's the paradox of Sabbath and part of what we're supposed to remember, I think.
And in terms of obedience too, we again have to remember God rested for a day and everything was okay. Right? There again is something this isn't just something God told us to do. This is also something God himself did. If we're going to trust the scripture that happened, and it was not just okay, but that it completed creation to actually enjoy it, then I think we have to take that just as seriously for ourselves. And there is a sense too that there is like the world, like not just that the world God created is good or has some good points, but that goodness is profound, that is deeper and more powerful than sin and death, that God's goodness is indelible and cannot be wiped away so easily by human failing and things like that. Like there is a solidity to that goodness, and we are invited to play with it, to go nuts, to have fun, or, to have a day of total stillness. Like, it doesn't have to look any particular way. Again, to go back to something we were talking about at the very beginning of the episode with the dance floor and the seed analogy that Heschel uses, is that it can look very small. Think about your life. There are a couple people in my life who I don't get to talk with very often. Some of them live very, very far away. And, by the numbers, by the 6 days a week material standard, I don't have much to show for my relationship with them. I don't text them as much. We don't call as much. And, you could look at that and say, oh, you're not that close with this person. And some of those people are the people I treasure the most and have some of the most meaningful, precious interactions with, things that went in that helped create this palace in time. This, like, Shabbat, I don't mean this in a literal sense, but the way that the 6 days of the week look at it, Shabbat kind of is like magic. It doesn't have to play by the same rules. The quantity does not matter. It's a qualitative thing. It's a sensory, an experiential, a relational thing. It's a living thing. And, it's like, with the baby I'm going to have, people say all the time, like, yeah, at first you'll be really freaked out. Like, oh my gosh, the baby fell down. Its head probably broke into 1 billion pieces and everything's ruined. And then you find out, oh no, it's okay. Even this little baby can handle what the world throws at it. And there is something, I think, that goes back to trusting the story, trusting that when God said it's okay for us to actually, fully, 100% just slow down and stop, that it is actually okay if you have to say, no, I can't work that day, or like, hey, I have to, cancel this plan or whatever, like, because I gotta be with my family. Like, that's okay. The world is not going to end. Inconvenience is not the end of the world. So there's a lot in there about remembering, but I want us to think about how remembering is used elsewhere in the text. Like, what are some other big times where remembrance is used, and specifically how God remembers things?
When you say that, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I'm thinking of the prophets. I'm thinking specifically of, is it Hosea, when God is remembering the days of Israel's youth as a child, or even as young lovers? So God remembering that past the wilderness time.
Absolutely, yeah. When you followed me into the desert.
Oh, and then also lots of language about remembering the covenant.
Yes, exactly. Now that's an interesting one, and a lot of hay is made over like, oh, did God forget? And then God had to remember, and I think that is confronting the tension there, but in exactly the wrong way. So let's think about it this way. Reed, let's say you and I had a covenant, had an agreement, and I forgot it. What would that mean, practically speaking?
Well, I don't think it would mean, I wouldn't take it to mean that you forgot that it existed. I would take it to mean that you were like living in a way, or somehow breaking that covenant, or being like unfaithful to the promise that we had made to each other.
Right, exactly. And in that sense, it's like it is as if the covenant doesn't exist for me. I'm acting as if it's not there because I've forgotten it, or maybe I've intentionally decided to forget it. We could pick apart the semantics there. But in some way, I am acting as if it's not real.
There you go.
I am, in fact, making it less real, because the covenant it's just an agreement we made up. There's no natural physical law where, nature or God will strike me dead if I break the rules. It's a agreement we made up. And when we remember it, we make it more real. When we forget it, it becomes less real. Mm-hmm. When I'm with my wife and I'm just looking at my present frustration and actually today right now is even a good example. I've had a very busy, crazy morning because I've had a lot of complications come up, and my wife put in her calendar that she was going to be going out to a meeting and doing an errand and will be home by 1:30. She's using the car from like 11 to 1:30. And so I'm like, oh, perfect. We're recording at 2. So she'll be home and I can like communicate a couple things. I just really need her help doing this thing. So we have dinner on time because we have things going on tonight and it's crazy. And she didn't come home at 1:30. And in fact, she had some other things to do and just, didn't update our calendar, which is, not a big deal. And it's very easy in a moment like that to forget, the days of our youth and who my wife really is and just be like, gosh darn it, you're messing up my day. How dare you, not do this and totally lose the context and just get lost in that very narrow thing, lose all that context that is the substance of our relationship. But then when I turn around and remember, oh yeah, she's pregnant and she's still working and doing errands and all that stuff. And, we trust each other. And I know that she would be as helpful as she possibly could. Like that's when the situation changes and I act differently and I experience life differently because I've remembered those things. And that is the kind of active memory I think this is talking about.
Yeah, I think sometimes we use remember in a pretty spontaneous sense, like something was happening and then I remembered, like something popped into my head, right? Almost like it's outside of my own agency. It occurred to me, it was recalled to me, like in a passive sense, right? But I think of remembering as like there is a way of remembering that is simply a recall of information or something like that, a recall of a thing that happened. But then there is like remembering, like if I remember someone who I love who passed away, to remember them is not that same kind of thing, right? There's a way of remembering that is bringing the past forth into the present. To sort of, like you said, make it real, to inhabit it again. That is, or just think about the etymology of remember, like to a member, like of your body, like a part of your body, like to give it a member, to give it a body again is like, we're going to make this real. And you know what I'm saying?
Ooh, yes. I like that a lot, Reed.
Yeah. As opposed to just remind or recall, but to bring the past forward into the present. And I think about that when I think about like if we think about it in that sense, what does it mean for God to remember the covenant or for us to remember the Sabbath? What is it that we are calling forth to inhabit the present moment from the past? And what is the good, holy benefit or purpose of doing that?
Yes. And I think when we combine this with everything Heschel said and everything we talked about regarding time and eternity, what sets apart Shabbat even more is that we aren't even necessarily just remembering the past. We can also be remembering the future that is in store for us. We can make more real the place to which God is bringing us. Like he said, it's eternity planted within us, growing beyond us. We are, in a sense, connecting with both the trueness of God's goodness in creation and everywhere else in the hearts of human beings, in God's Spirit working in our lives, all that goodness. But we can also just as easily on Shabbat, and this is where, again, like I said, there's kind of a magical component to it. We can invoke and make real as a spiritual reality for ourselves on Shabbat. We can make real, like, I know where you're bringing all this, God. I know a little bit of what kingdom looks like, and I'm going to make today a day where I just live as if that was already true. I just live in that world. And that
Josh,
is what?
I don't know if you're probably not aware of this, but you are just setting up Beekner so perfectly right now that I have to butt in and say, because your observation about the future, making real the future, I think is so dead on. I think about this. So on Friday mornings, Friday's a day off for me and for Leanne. We have this just kind of amazing, charmed life where both of us have the same day off during the week, and I don't take it for granted in the least. And we have a practice of this day, a routine, a rhythm. The boys go to school, we go work out, we come home, we make coffee, we sit at the table together, and for a solid hour, we will usually I'll read something to her, or she'll read, and then we spend time this kind of remembering, right? And into the future. And a lot of times it's surrounding the lives of our boys, thinking about and just bringing all these experiences and then thinking forward into the future. And it's just a time to sort of, in this, being completely present in this present moment, but by bringing together the past and the future in a kind of, I don't know, it's a really life-giving thing for us. I mean, I cannot say how much I love this time of my week. And Buechner says, he says, eternity is not an endless duration of time. He says it is the essence of time. And he describes it this way. He says, if you take a pinwheel and you spin it really fast, all the colors blur into one, and like the essence of the color spectrum is white. It is the essence, like all the colors combined become white, And he says, if you take time and you spin it fast enough, past, present, and future, what you get is this like blurry essence that is eternity. This is what we call it when the past, the present, and the future all come into like one singular present moment. And I think that involves remembering is the key to that, where remembering is not the opposite of forgetting. It's not like, oh, I forgot and then I remembered, but it is like, how do I bring all of these parts of time into this moment right here? And that is eternity. That is, when I think about it being adjacent to eternity, I think it's when I am, and this is the amazing power of like the mind and the imagination, is you actually can be in two moments at once. Like you can, we talk about how we're limited to time and God is not. And I want to say, well, asterisk, like, yes, I am not God, not even close, not even anything like that. And yet I am not just stuck right here and like looking at whatever is in front of me at the moment. I can be here and there. And that is a practice that we are encouraged to do because there is something about the holiness of that gets us closer to God. I am fully convinced of that.
I love that. And I mean, shout out to my last big series, the Mishkan series, where we talked about remembering and witness as crucial to be able to hold on to God's presence while we're in times of darkness. And I think that Shabbat is the reflection of that same practice, but doing it in a context of joy and celebration. Like, it's not just something we need to do when times are tough. We need to remember these things all the time for our joy to taste like all the beautiful things God has given us and will give us. And to me, that's like, we talk about trusting the story, and it's one thing to be able to look back at what's happened and having seen God's faithfulness, but we're also told what is coming. And if we can put just as much trust in that, Shabbat is where we actually put our weight down on that and say, am I going to live in this way? Can I even just begin imagining or playing with the idea of what it would look like for just being in God's presence the whole day, being swept up in eternity, having all those beautiful things in the palace of time, like just descending on us in a moment. And I have some more thoughts on that. But before I get into it, I want to talk about our other word today, which is the Hebrew word nasa. Now, this is a little bit trickier of a word. First of all, maybe we should cut this because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But for bonus Hebrew points, Reed, do you remember what nasa means?
Are you saying nasa with an N?
No, nasa.
Okay. It feels asa. Yes, I do. And I think I've gotten it wrong enough times in Hebrew lessons that finally it stuck with me. It's like to make or to do.
Yes. Yes. And this word is used throughout the 6 days of creation where God makes things. And it's not the kind of ex nihilo creation. That's the word bara that's used all throughout Genesis 1. But asa, asa is used alongside it, and it has more to do with like working something. Like you might think of like kneading clay and squishing it around and getting it into the right shape. It's not just snap your fingers and it appears.
Right. I'm taking materials and I'm like fashioning it. That's working it into something.
Exactly. Now, what's interesting is that so this word is associated with God's work of creation, but in a couple places, it's actually used to describe what we're supposed to do on Shabbat. And now I'll open up the floor. I don't really have a preference who reads this, but let's look at Exodus 31, starting in verse 16. Who wants to do this?
I think it's got to be Brent's turn.
I've been mulling some ideas, and I actually do need to read this before I can talk about it. And I think we're leading into it anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Nice.
This is in the NASB, by the way. So the sons of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a permanent covenant. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, but on the seventh day he ceased from labor and was refreshed.
Yes, and there's a lot of stuff in there. But you probably didn't hear the word for make or do anywhere in there because they translated it as celebrate. Right there in verse 16, to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations. Now, I kind of like that translation because they're looking at it and they're like, well, that sounds like kind of a worky kind of word. But we are told to make the Sabbath, to do the Sabbath. And while I think celebration is a fine word for that, it's kind of an interesting thing to throw into the mix here. What does it mean to make Shabbat? I mean, we've talked about it a little bit with this palace image. But I think this really gets to the heart of what we're talking about. What is it we're supposed to fill this time with? How do we do Shabbat in a positive sense?
Well, and I'm not as familiar with the NASB and what their stylistic choices mean. In that second part where it says, on the seventh day he ceased from labor and was refreshed. From labor is in italics. Is that to indicate that those words are not actually in the original text and they've added that for clarity purposes?
Yes. You could read it as, but on the seventh day he ceased. And they probably just didn't want it to sound like God blinked out of existence. But it's ceasing in the sense that we talked about last episode with Shabbat meaning to just be still, to cease from activity, just total, simple stillness.
And this is what I was thinking about, because in a sense, we are supposed to cease from all of those things. But I don't we've been talking about all these things like remember and celebrate or make. And these things are all very much active. So it's not that we're supposed to be just lazy and try to do as little as possible. We still have this active role of some form of creation that we're supposed to do on the seventh day, even if it is not all of the stuff that we do the rest of the week.
Yeah.
It's not, and I think maybe this is why it's been so hard for me to find a way to hold on to Sabbath and actually make something of it, because I'm like, well, how can I just do nothing? Even just sitting there, my body forces me to do all of this work of breathing and heart beating and
yes,
all of these things. There is supposed to be some kind of activity on the Sabbath. It's just supposed to be different.
Yes, and this gets right into it. And I'm glad you focus on that second verse, because now you've unlocked a secret bonus Heschel quote. So what I want to focus on is what happens right after it says God became still. What does it say right after that? And was refreshed. And let me double check this in Blue Letter Bible. This would be so embarrassing if I got this wrong. Oh boy. So if I'm remembering correctly, let's see, what verse is that? 17. Is it Yinefesh? Yes, it's Yinefesh. So the word there, the root word is nefesh. Does that sound familiar to anyone?
It's the word for soul.
It's the word for soul. Now, I included this specifically because of another one of my favorite little Heschel quotes. Reed, why don't you go ahead and read that little Heschel quote I snuck in down there?
The secret bonus one?
Yes.
It was on the seventh day that God gave the world a soul.
Ooh, juicy.
Juicy. That is juicy.
God was refreshed. God, if you read Jewish writings on the Sabbath, a lot of times they'll talk about like on Sabbath, you literally get an extra soul. Don't ask me how that works.
Talk about a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would it be safe? So the first seventh day, God gave the world a soul, but then is it safe to say that he resold, refreshed, resold?
Mm-hmm.
Is that because you're saying like there's two souls present on the Sabbath? Is what this is getting at?
Okay. This is what I didn't want to get into. Like I said, I'm not going to try and explain how that works, but I like the concept of when you're talking about what is it we're actually doing, what is it we're making, what is it we're trying to do. I think that there is something profound about this idea of nefesh, which it does mean soul. It also is a very embodied version of the soul. Like Scripture talks a lot about animals having a soul in this regard. And, we're told, with the prohibition against consuming blood, that's because the nefesh is in the blood. So there's this idea of nefesh as like your soul, but also kind of this idea of like an animating force. There's a many words for soul in Hebrew, so that this has a specific bent and flavor to it.
I think this is a theme throughout the Sabbath when you read that book, though, because Heschel is just bringing in all of these ideas, and he's like, yeah, but this doesn't quite get it right. So then we try this other idea, but then that's, wrong in this way.
Yes.
And so I'm not saying like, literally we have two souls, but like that is the idea they're getting at, is like there's this addition, this second layer of something that's happening on the Sabbath.
Yeah. And
however that may actually be.
I think for, the cultural context we find ourselves in, once you start going down like, okay, well, I have a second soul. And like, I think that gets us thinking in the wrong direction.
Okay.
What I want to turn to is, what if what we're doing and we're making and like the actual thing that's being made or worked on in Shabbat is that it is the creation of more life, that we are engaged. We talk about things being life-giving. Like, and there's some ways you can interpret this as like being refreshed, like when we just think about like, oh, you rest and then you recuperate and then you're ready to go back to work, which I think definitely there's enough said about Shabbat that it isn't just that kind of a practical thing, but that is also present. Like that is definitely talked about with regards to the yearly Shabbat that is for the land to rest. But I think that's where this idea of new life arising just out of us enjoying, connecting with, like there is new life that it seems to just spontaneously generate. The same as like when, a lot of times the things that fill us with the most joy, the most life in God's sense of the word is like, having a small conversation, grabbing coffee with someone you're really close to, like not anything complicated, not any like deep, dark rituals or, profound alchemical symbols and knowledge of God's secret 81st name or whatever the heck. Like the things that give us the most life are the things that connect us to creation, to each other. It's almost as if we are growing the soul of ourselves, God, the world. I don't know. This is getting into mystic stuff, and I don't want to say too much because I know this. I don't want anyone to trip up on theology here. But the idea that this is something that is, in a spiritual sense, we are actually adding new life when we just sit back and see things for what they are, see the person sitting across from you in the most joyful, playful light. That to me is the heart of like what Shabbat is actually there to do functionally, or what it means to practice Shabbat in a positive sense. What it means to celebrate it is to not just remember, like we were talking about before, not just informationally remember, not just bodily refreshment, but on a spiritual sense, like renewing the thing that inspires us. You want to talk about etymology of English word, inspired, to be filled with the Spirit, to be filled with breath. That is what Shabbat is for. It is sitting back and I mean, you could look at it through a million different lenses, but there is life that we cannot perceive that is growing up right under us. There is love between people that they may not even notice. There is I think a lot of times, I think the idea of the Imago Dei, the image of God, right? This is something that, is kind of very standard Christian theology, but like the implications of it are something that we don't always engage with, at least on a felt experiential level. Like I am looking on my screen at three faces that all have God somewhere behind them. And that is profound. And I like to think that I've seen glimpses of it, but I haven't gotten to the bottom of it at all. I haven't gotten to the bottom of it for myself, let alone anyone else. And that, I think, is kind of where this idea of like, there's more soul there, there's more goodness there that we haven't explored just because, we're running around and we got other stuff to do and we got to make appointments. And if we just sit and look and enjoy and perceive and all those things like that, when we remember that that's there, and then we lean into that and look for it and play around with it, and it appears there. It was always there. It was eternally there.
So many times we have to collaborate with each other on so many things, right? And a more cynical way of thinking about it would be like, people are a means to an end for us. But I don't want to be cynical about it. Just the facts of life are, you got to collaborate. I need you to, we have to look at something else together. We have to stand here and look at raising this child. We have to stand here and look at coaching this soccer team. We have to look at making this podcast episode, right? And there's always something that we're looking at together. And this is why I love it when friends come to visit from out of town. And we just sit in the living room and there's no entertainment. Like, this is, by the way, like a little shout out. Don't have a TV in your living room. Just have furniture where people sit comfortably, and you are each other is what you are looking at. You know what I'm saying? And we don't have anything that we're collaborating on. We're not doing a Bible study together. We're not figuring out this or that. It's just, we're going to put some people in a room and we're going to see what happens as they just start being together and remembering together and being present to each other together. That kind of interaction, I think, for a lot of people is actually pretty rare. So much of the time we're trying to just get, and this is maybe where it actually just occurs to me, labor, like we're working, and this is why we need a day off of work. Not just for the sake of like our own rest, but so that we can see one another as what you were just saying, Josh, like somewhere behind there is God. And I'm not going to get to the depth of that so long as we are working together on something. And again, it is not bad to work together. This is how work should be done. And yet we have to see each other as more than co-laborers. We have to see each other just as the people that we are. And I think that's like I don't know. Those are some of the most refreshing times to me. You know how like when you're with people in that way and you just walk away feeling fuller?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That to me is like, that's Sabbath. Sabbath is in there.
Josh, do you have a TV in your living room?
I do.
You do? Oh no.
I do, but it's also not my fault, because it was screwed into the wall when we got here.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a pass on that. But I don't have one in my living room either. And all three of us are very enthusiastic film fans. Like there's a time for that. But having a space set aside for that direct connection between people is very important if you can achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't have the option for whatever reason. Maybe there is a TV screwed into your wall. Like there's always obstacles in some sense. Maybe you don't happen to have a day off together with your spouse like Reed has. Like we don't always have the same opportunities, but when you have an opportunity to take that and not to say like, oh no, we're disengaged from the culture, we're above that, we're better than that. We're not saying that. We're saying having that space where you can achieve these sorts of direct connections between people is really powerful.
Yes. Okay. That is actually a perfect setup. So now, Brent, will you read that last little verse? Because that is going to catapult us into all the practical stuff.
Okay, Deuteronomy 5. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to celebrate the Sabbath day.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what's interesting to me here is that, we have the word remember right there, but it might not be exactly what we think about when we think about remembering on Shabbat. Why is this reminder of their time as slaves juxtaposed here with Asa doing, celebrating, making Shabbat? Now, I think that this speaks to maybe a little bit of the more practical side of why we need to go out of our way to do things different, because it's not just 6 days of labor where we're just, where we're co-laboring, where we're getting stuff done. It's also 6 days of, living in a way that it's easy to get pulled back into empire. And because of that, that makes this an even more sacred and important part of us, setting aside a day that looks exactly the opposite. And what's interesting too is that we just pulled this little chunk of a verse, and it's in a much larger section. And if you know your Deuteronomy well, you know that this chapter is the second giving of the 10 Commandments. Largely, God reiterates a lot of things, but some of it is stated differently. And in this giving of the 10 Commandments, God includes this when he's talking about Sabbath. He includes this aside about remembering Egypt, and that I think that speaks to, again, this kind of dual function of memory, that it helps us make certain things more real. What's interesting to me, both of these verses that we've read come at very important times. The verse we read from Exodus comes right before God hands Moshe the 10 Commandments, the tablets that the first ones, the ones that God wrote with his own finger. And this is coming in the second reiteration of the 10 Commandments. And what I think is really important and grounding about this is that when we do have to take the positive aspect of this seriously. Like when you're in Shabbat, you're playing around, you're enjoying, whatever. And there's a way in which, especially in our culture and the culture we have around leisure, and the way that for us, freedom and independence is something that is more defined by, nobody can tell me what I can't do. And that is, I think, kind of out of step with the sort of liberation that God talks about, the sort of freedom God talks about, but also it's a different kind of rest than what God talks about. And so there is a level at which, when we talk about the palace and this sense of wonder and awe and majesty and grandeur, part of that is experiential, but there is another level at which we have to take seriously there is something authoritative here. This isn't just we're just playing pretend like the world is great, and then the other 6 days we go back to reality. I think it's I don't know how you do it the other 6 days of the week, but certainly on Shabbat, it really behooves you to be all in, to actually take it very seriously. Even just in a practical sense, if you're working a job where you don't really have a functional Shabbat and you say, hey, I need to observe this for religious reasons. And they say, well, I don't know. And they hem and haw. And you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's okay. But if you say like, no, this is serious to me. If that's the heart you develop for Shabbat, it goes a long way because the world loves to interrupt things. But I want to use this to get back to the practical stuff we were talking about. So again, we have Asa, what we do, what we make of the experiences we have on the day. And then we have Zakar. We have these remembrances, these things that we make real, things in the ancient past, things in our personal past, things in our future that God has promised us. We need to remember them. So the first thing I want to bring up, which we've kind of already broken into, is ritual. I think a lot of times when we talk about this kind of Shabbat, no rules, you just rest, there's no right way to do it, it's easy to just think like, oh, I got to like spontaneously reinvent the wheel of Shabbat every single week, and that can be very daunting. But there's a lot of really cool existing rituals for Shabbat, and also like read what you just said about your ritual with your wife of reading to each other. That actually reminds me a lot of there's a Jewish tradition of Shabbat where at the beginning of Shabbat, the patriarch will say a formal blessing over the kids and over his wife. And that's like part of how Shabbat enters, or something that happens throughout the day. And actually, that reminds me too of something. Mitch Lavender, who y'all have probably met by this point, his family has a really cool Shabbat tradition where they, at the beginning of Shabbat, they talk about all the things they've really enjoyed from the past week. And at the end of Shabbat, they recount all the things that they really loved about the day of Shabbat. And like, that's a really great way of like living out remembrance. But in general, I think a ritual is a really good way to start. And again, it doesn't have to be something that you plan out and have it locked down and have a solid liturgy. Like, find something that refreshes you, that connects you to the awe of God. Maybe you drive out and sit in a park. Maybe you just sit on your porch and watch cars go by, or take a nap and look at the sun coming through the trees. Like, it can be small. If you are starting this out, you need a small dance floor. Maybe you don't even need a dance floor. Maybe you just need a spot in your room where you dance in front of the mirror and work on your moves until you feel safe enough to go out on a dance floor. Like, this is about the heart. This is about the soul. This is about wonder. I mean, Heschel will talk your ear off about wonder. That dude loves talking about wonder. And I think he's onto something, like having a genuine sense of connectedness that is embodied and incarnated. That is the key to making Shabbat real. And I know you talked about this a little bit, Reed. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and Brent, of course, your thoughts as well, on the incarnational aspect of this, the celebration, the party. How do we do this?
I was going to say, for us, there are a lot of creature comforts of food and drink that are incorporated into our rest days, because we just don't have as much time or space to enjoy them, during the working week. So for us, we actually spend more time making meals together, like Saturday morning, slower, like in the kitchen together. We have a little bar by our kitchen and like the boys sit there and we do breakfast, like we make breakfast together, and we have more time to make, like we get out the good coffee and we like make the pour over, or for the boys, we make like their London fogs, like their tea drinks. They have actually, this is a practice we took from a friend of mine. Shout out to Ben, in St. Louis, who they talked about like Sabbath drinks or special drinks for their kids, like when they were young. And it was like, you get to indulge in like whatever sugary sweet things you like or whatever. And so for us, the incarnational aspect is like the things of the body, like enjoying the things of the body, and not having to one, feel guilty about that. 'Cause sometimes we have complexes about that, depending on who you are, but also to really take your time enjoying them. Like, we're not rushing off to soccer practice after this.
Yes.
Although I will say, like, for people with families who are listening, and especially if you feel the push, pull, the tug of, well, it's not just me, but I'm orchestrating the lives of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people, and my children are involved in things that happen on the weekends. I can only say, yes, I sympathize with you. Soccer season is really difficult for us because we're traveling for games. We try to maintain even like a rejoicing in the things of the body, even just like in athletics and stuff, like try to maintain that sort of attitude about it. However, there are definitely times where I'm like, man, this feels like labor to me, and it's butting into my Sabbath, and it's a very difficult decision, because the thought of pulling my kids out of that just for the sake of being like, well, nope, this is our day of rest, and so you can't be on the soccer team. Like, I think I would actually be murdering my child's soul if I told him, like, you can't play soccer because of Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So it is not often convenient, and for better or for worse, I think sometimes we have to, meld our lives around like the things that everybody has going on. That's just the reality of it for us.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, and we're actually going to focus on it next week's episode with Marty.
Oh, okay.
Because that is a really huge thing. And a lot of that stems from the fact that there is no communal Shabbat the way there is in that context. So this is, again, where there aren't a lot of hard and fast rules. And in fact, I think that's how it should be in our context with, we're worshiping in spirit and in truth. There isn't a central rhythm heartbeat that we can just flow with. But that is also kind of a cool place to be. You get to explore, you get to figure it out. And if your Shabbat has to look different, or like one of the practices we do is like if something messes with our Shabbat, sometimes we'll just take Sunday and say, hey, Sunday is going to be our resurrected Shabbat, and we're going to do Shabbat then.
Yes. And I feel like we're often doing it like, it's like, well, this Saturday morning and then Sunday afternoon is like another block of time where we are Shabbating, because Saturday afternoons we have soccer games, Sunday morning we have church, and so we're going to work around it and just kind of do what we can. But I think it is so real, the struggle of, as a community, an American community, a Kirksville, Missouri community, we're not doing this together, and we don't have that social contract where we're all agreeing to be off. And that does make it really hard. So I just wanted to amplify that and say yes and amen. Thank you for saying that. It is real.
And one last practical thing I want to say, there's the ritual thing is like, there's a billion ways to do that. Probably more, because there's probably as many ways to do it as there are people.
Yeah.
Rituals that speak to you and are life-giving and add more soul to the day, add to that atmosphere. But the one thing that I think is like the one weird trick that doctors don't want you to know is that it's time. Just take things you normally do and just slow them down. Mm-hmm. Spend a little extra time making your coffee. If you're driving somewhere, don't try and be like, oh, I got to get to the closest spot. Like, park way out in the sticks and enjoy the long walk to the Target or whatever the heck. And the same with resources. Like, just splurge, have special drinks, make it just a little nicer, a little more life-giving. This isn't rocket science. It's just slowing down in a world that likes to step on the gas.
Well, and to bring it back around to the palace analogy, one of the things that typically strikes me about a palace, and a lot of times when I'm visiting one, it's like more of a museum sort of setting, and so we're slowly wandering through, we're looking at all these things. But then some palaces, you don't loop through it. You like go down one thing and then you have to come back the same way. Mm. And so then you're not looking at things so closely, and you just realize like, oh, this is a long hallway. And to get from, this one meeting room to the entrance, like you were spending a lot of time just moving, and like there's lots of things to appreciate around it, but there's all this time, and you have this objective, you're going to this other place, but there's lots of time in between.
I like that. Yeah, it's a big space. lots of space to wander around in, lose yourself in time. And honestly, if your Shabbat looks like literally doing nothing, just eat, sleep, look outside, like, congratulations, you figured it out. You did it. Like it can be as simple as it needs to be. It can be as rich. It could be if you're an introvert and you really need time away from community. Just, yeah, like there was a period of my life where my Shabbat was just eating cold soup and reading Torah and taking naps. And that was a really cool time in my life. Didn't have to think about anything but Torah and God. And there's other people who it needs to be filled with community. And just with all those things, you know, find the little nodes that you can form a ritual around. Find the little special things. It's a living, breathing relationship. And all you have to do is slow down, take a look, let that sense of wonder fall over you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know this conversation could go on for a really long time, and I don't want to make it go on even longer by asking this question. But I like what you say, that there are as many ways, as many rituals as there are people. And yet we're talking about this one thing that is Shabbat. So what is the unifying principle that's kind of underneath it, you know? How, and maybe and I think maybe you just described it there. It's the slowing down, or it's maybe just the word rest is what is the unifying. And so for you, what is restful, and for me, what is restful may be different. But the point is that it's restful. Or what would you say, Josh? What's the unifying principle underneath all the different ways that Sabbath looks?
So I think my explanation would kind of hearken a little bit to the tension Brent brought up earlier of like, wait, if it's stillness, then how does celebration fit in with that? So here's what I think the essence of Shabbat is. It's that it's stillness, and then it also includes the spontaneous joy that erupts when you engage with the world from that place of stillness. It is when you slow down, and maybe it's you hear the birds outside, and you spend the rest of the day looking up, like, you know, what are the birds outside? Because I'm just so interested in these birds. Or, you know, like, it's when we slow down, it's then the things that rise up that catch our attention, that draw our soul, and then us playing with it. So it's
your leaf, Josh.
Yes,
it's the leaf. This I'm under. It struck me that you said I am under one of these leaves, and then which one? And now I'm going to start looking. You know, the stillness in the soul, the voice, then the joy. I think that's good. Don't say anything else. I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to keep it in my head. The stillness and the spontaneous joy that erupts from interacting with the world from that stillness. That's good. That's all I needed. I'm gonna get that tattooed on my face so that I see it in the mirror. Well, I think it's so, like, honestly, for me, it's so, like, it's often difficult because there are so many different ways to talk about Sabbath, and then it feels like, are we even talking about something here? Like, a single? Are we talking about just a million different ways to say, like, have a good time, you know? And so that's why I need it's just my weird Enneagram 5 brain. I'm sure Elle's already on to, if she's listening to this episode, she was already thinking this, but like, when I ask the question, what is the unifying principle? Like, I need to be able to synthesize something, and that's the perfect thing to synthesize. So many, many thanks.
How wonderful.
Well, you can go to BayModestFellowship.com to find the show notes for this episode, as well as all the others. You can find a group. You can find upcoming events. You can get in touch with us. You can share your Sabbath practices. I think part of it is, you know, for those of us who are more experienced in practicing Sabbath, we need to share those ideas with others, because it's a struggle to figure out, like, what should our rhythms be? What should our traditions be? And it doesn't have to be complicated, but it does need to be something. Yeah. We are supposed to remember it. It is a commandment. So let's figure out how to do that. And part of doing that is community. So, like, we should be sharing these ideas and working this out together. So we have ways to do all of that on the website. But thanks for joining us on the BAMA podcast this week. We'll talk to you again soon.
It so reminds me, maybe I should have said this while we were still doing the episode, but like some people have noticed, like, so when people are at our house and it's like Saturday morning and I do a pour over and they're like, you just stand there and watch it go through. And I'm like, yeah, and Liam is like, she was saying this to somebody recently. She's like, yeah, he really just likes to stand there and just watch the coffee percolate. And the thing is, like, I get that stillness of just, because I have the time to, right? It's like during the working week, you got to use the automated, drip coffee maker. But now I got my time and I'm putting it in manual and I just get to watch this and I smell it and I see it and the whole experience is elevated and there is so much joy that just kind of spontaneously erupts from the aroma, the taste of just, and it's that incarnated, I am in the world that God has made, and here is something good that comes just from being in a good world made by God. And that joy really does spontaneously erupt from that stillness. Or I think, Josh, like what you're saying about the birds too, is like, that's so real. When I have the time from the stillness and then to say, okay, like, what is that, And that's so real. That's so good.
That blesses me to hear, man.
I also wonder, and like this is, and I didn't want to bring this up in the episode because I think it could be a really long tangent, but I struggle with like, what should the role of entertainment be during Shabbat? Specifically, like what I would deem to be just kind of like stupid entertainment. And on the one hand, it's like kick your feet up and relax.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like, is this giving me bonus soul, or is this like sucking the soul out that is present there? And
I think that also involves like the other people in the room too, because it's like, like especially when you talk about kids, where it's just like they're really excited to see this movie, and for them it probably is very life-giving because they're so excited they like can't see straight. And like, or like another great example, I enjoy watching a sport. I'm not super engaged, but Sophia loves sports, and especially basketball. I love to just sit on the couch next to her while she's watching basketball and be doing my own thing. Maybe I'm reading a book, maybe I'm on my computer. And I think this is where it's like, on one hand, you're never going to do it perfectly. So it's more a matter of trying, because I think this is where you can't prescribe yourself to that perfect Shabbat, but you can get there by feeling your way there. And the point is for it to become a natural extension of our relationship with God and our rhythm. So I think that with TV, like we talked about this on the last episode, we have a thing where if we're watching a show, we make sure that we don't binge. And that doesn't mean that we don't watch a lot of the show. It means that between each episode, we get up, we make some more coffee, or we make some tea, and we take a little bathroom break, or we get a snack.
Oh, sure.
And we check in with each other. Like, how are you feeling? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you need to move your body? How are you feeling? And sometimes we're like, I'm just really enjoying this show. This is really cool. And we're laughing about it, or we're, really invested in it. And, it also, I think, changes with the seasons. Like when we were going through the cancer stuff, one of my best Shabbat memories was the Shabbat where we watched RRR, which was just like, I was hooting and hollering so loud. My wife was like, please be quiet. There are people next door. Like, you're raising a ruckus. And like, that definitely gave me soul. Like we definitely know that can be true in cinema, but I think that can also be something that happens even with like,
sure,
really, really dumb stuff. Like I am firmly convinced that God does not really think much of our sense of like highbrow and lowbrow. Like, I think that it kind of reminds me of like when you're in third grade and you're just like, right. I would kill Barney. Like, like you just are like, I have so little regard for that lower form of children's TV. And like, it's just kind of like, okay, like that's, I get it, but it's also kind of a silly distinction to make. But it's also a real distinction. And that's where like
Right.
it becomes like, we talked about this last week of like, am I just watching this to consume, or
Yeah.
is this something that I'm like, I am genuinely interested in how this mystery is resolved or something like that. Like there's
Right.
and that's only something you can learn by engaging with it and being present and aware, which is difficult. And like, there are some Shabbats where we were like, hey, no devices, no electricity today. Or not no electricity, no devices today.
Right.
And those are really cool. I think, especially when we have a kid, the screen time is going to become a very important question. And I don't know, maybe we'll throw a rug over our TV. Maybe we'll cover it over with art or something.
Yeah. For us, I think it's really, there's just the balance of, I want you to be able to do something you enjoy, but also we want to be together. And I think actually like the community aspect takes otherwise soul-sucking things and kind of elevates them, and we can enjoy it together, even if it's a dumb thing, and that's really what it's about. And there is a way that you could like watch a highbrow king of comedy and like be totally insulated from everything and cut off from the world around you. And that's not very good.
One of the hard rules I have is that if I'm watching a movie on Shabbat, I don't write anything on Letterboxd that day, because if I do, then the whole time I'm watching it,
you're thinking about
exactly, and that cannot stand.
Yeah, I think about, sometimes I talk about those people who are like who are athletes,
Yeah,
and it's like, maybe Sabbath, like some people really like to go for a run and it's very relaxing. And maybe for you need to not, this is the day when you need to not run, because so much of your life is, fitness, and like you need to be unfit for a day. And maybe for others, it's like, you need to get out and like go move your body, like you said. So it really is like there is that. And this is why I'm looking for the unifying principle, because I'm afraid that it becomes so diffuse and falls apart. And it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever you want,
And that is such a real tension. And it's something that even with that, I mean, I'm glad we had that conversation, because I don't think I would have at any other point in my life have phrased it that way. But this was a really great conversation, and I'm so glad it's continuing.
The joy erupting from the stillness.
Yes, exactly.
Even though, well, I remembered actually, Graham rode his bike to school today, and so he's riding his bike home.
Oh.
However, he's going to be here in a second, and it's going to get noisier in my house. But
okay, cool. I'm glad that helps me feel still, because now it's like, I'm not keeping Reed from doing something.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. We're just buds now. Now we're just chatting like buds.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, right. I'm putting this at the end of the episode. I have one other thing to share that came up multiple times. So we talked about the idea of wonder and how Heschel talks about wonder a lot. And after our Psalm 19 episode read, somebody named Josephine wrote in and said, "Hey, you should check out this book, I Asked for Wonder," which is I guess an anthology. Have you guys read this one?
I think I have it.
Yeah, both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of quotes of Heschel about wonder, edited by somebody.
It's
or did Heschel actually write it?
I think it's a combination of like speeches and essays
and passages. Like it's like, even some of it is, I think, if I remember right, some of it is just like a paragraph, or an excerpt from something.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But if you're like, how do I engage this concept of wonder? How do I find these, how do I do this in a simple way without overcomplicating it and actually enjoying it and actually being refreshed on Sabbath? It seems like this is a good resource. I'm glad that both of you have read it, so I'm not just blindly recommending something that I don't know.
I would actually have a different recommendation because the first book I ever read of Heschel's, and it was hugely formative for me. It like really helped me get what he was saying. Is the book Who is Man? And that is also a short little sliver. It's not the prophets.
That's the one you recommended to me for my sabbatical.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a very precious book to me, and especially in terms like it really helped me reframe the kind of questions I was asking, and like finding because like a lot of these questions on one level are a lot like the kind of anxiety about doing Shabbat right, but they also come from a very real place of wanting to be faithful to it And a lot of times the only way we know how to answer it, or like our default, are like, well, is this okay or is this not okay? Or if it is okay, how do I do it? And I think his book really helped me change my thinking in terms of like how to actually use a lens of just pure like relationship. Like, how do we, what does this actually mean for us? What is the actual thing we are trying to capture? What is the unifying principle? And but to answer that from a relational rather than a philosophical, purely philosophical point of view.
Yeah.
An earlier work of his, I'm guessing maybe he goes by Abraham J. Heschel on the cover instead of Abraham Joshua Heschel.
All right. I'm going to go because actually my computer is about to die now. So I'm going to...
We've pushed our technologies to the limits. All right. Enough for one day.
Who would have thought that our episode would go long, Reed?
No, never.
The Sabbath is about knowing when to say enough.
That's right. And now at 1 hour and 58 minutes and 5 seconds, it is time to say enough.
Oh, his computer died.
Really did die. Wow.
Okay.
That is amazing. I hope that doesn't mess up his recording file.